you.
the university librarian, the provost, College of Medicine, the dean of arts, deans of other faculties, the postgraduate school and of students, rectors of institutes and centers, vice chancellors of other universities, emeritus professors of the University of Ibadan, heads of departments, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the 414th in the series of the University of Ibadan inaugural lectures will be delivered this evening by Professor Ademola Omombewaji Dasylva of our Department of English on behalf of the Faculty of Arts, Institute of African Studies. Born in Ilesha, which makes him truly my kinsman, on 15th October 1952, Professor Dasylva is one of the great grandsons of the legendary Ado-Ekiti warlord Aduloju Odoado. The young Ademola Dasylva had his elementary education at St. Mary's Catholic Primary School, Ifofin, Ilesha, and attended Our Lady and St. Kizito's Minor Seminary, Ede, from 1967 to 1972. We were both at the Polytechnic Ibadan in 1976, where he studied for the advanced level Cambridge and WASC A-level between 1976 and 1978. He gained admission as a direct entry candidate to the Department of English, University of Nigeria, Nsukka, in the 1978-1979 academic session, and later transferred to the University of Ife, now Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, as a 300-level student in the 1979-80 session, and graduated in June 1981. Thereafter, he participated in the National Youth Service Corps Scheme as a teacher at Arabic and Islamic Advanced College, Umupo, and Umupo Grammar School in Kwara State from August 1981 till August 1982. Professor Dasylva taught briefly at Ada Secondary Commercial Grammar School, Ada, from October 1982 till January 1983, and later utilized a federal government scholarship for his master's degree in African literature, which he completed in 1984 at the then University of Ife. He registered for his PhD program in African literature at University of Ibadan in 1990-91 session and successfully defended his thesis in July 1994. Prior to his service in this university, Professor Dasylva served as an assistant lecturer at the Oyo State College of Arts and Science, Oscars, Ile-Ife, from March 1983 till May 1988, from where he moved to Adeyemi College of Education, Ondo, with effect from 1st June 1988 as lecturer grade 3. As a senior lecturer there, he was head of the Department of English twice, during which he, among other things, brought a lot of innovations into the English Studies program. As an activist and labor union leader, Professor Dasylva served as the Foundation National Secretary of the Academic Staff Union of Colleges of Education and the branch chairman of Kwasu, Adeyemi College of Education, Ondo. He served in Ondo till May 1988. He joined the Department of English of this university as a lecturer grade 1 with effect from 1st June 1995. So he has been here for at least 22 years as a member of the faculty. He was promoted senior lecturer with effect from 1st October 1998, reader with effect from 1st October 2003, and professor with effect from 1st October 2006. Professor Dasylva has over 60 scholarly publications in reputable local and international scholarly journals. He has authored, co-authored, and edited 6 scholarly books, a monograph, 4 biographies, and a collection of poems. His collection of poems, Songs of Odamolugbe, won the 2006 Anna Cadbury National Award for Poetry. Till date, he has supervised 17 doctoral students, 4 of whom are now professors, and 3 associate professors, and eminent academics in their own right. Within this university, Professor Dasylva has served diligently in different capacities. Member of Senate representing congregation from 2001 to 2003, and from 2006 till date. Course supervisor of the use of English, 1996 till 1998. Convener of Ibadan International Conference on African Literature with the theme, The Muse as Archivist, African Literature as Alternative History, 2008. Convener, Panel E, Senior Staff Disciplinary Committee, 2004 till 2011. Of course, it's not a committee any same person would like to serve on. But in spite of that, he received a special letter of commendation. He was Chairman, Faculty of Arts, ICT Committee, 2006 till 2010. He was board member of UI, Information Technology and Media Services, items, until 2015. Pioneer Chairman of the editorial board of the Premier Tower, the official quarterly news magazine of the university. Chairman, University of Ibadan Scholarly Publications and Global Access Committee from 2006 till 2010. Acting Head, Department of English from 14th August 1999 till 13th August 2001. Director of General Studies Program from January 2010 till September 2012. Principal Investigator for the E-Class Project, a project funded by ETI PHEA of South Africa from 2011 to 2012, and which benefited the General Studies Program a great deal. He was convener of the first ever National Conference of Directors and Program Officers of General Studies Program of Nigerian universities in January 2011. The decisions reached at the 3-day conference are there to redirect positively the syllabus of each course in General Studies Program. He was coordinator of the University of Ibadan Museum Development Program, a Mercator UI funded project in the absence of the principal investigator from 2009 to 2012. The execution of the project had led to the establishment of the UI Heritage Museum, which is temporarily domiciled at the Trenchard Hall Gallery overlooking the Tower Court. UI Photo History Magazine, a 55-minute docu history of UI, 1948 till 2011. Postcards and other memorabilia were produced, which were among the legacies of the UI Heritage Museum project. He was also chairman, University's Intra-Campus Committee from 2005 to 2011. And Professor Dasylva was pioneer recipient of the University of Ibadan Award of Excellence for Community Development in 2012. You will notice that I've just read out an impressive list of administrative duties that Professor Dasylva has been involved with in this institution. Beyond that is his diligence and commitment to duty. He is totally devoted to this institution. I'd like to give a practical demonstration of this. The then Dean of PG School, Professor Aderinto, invited me to present the 68th Interdisciplinary Discourse of the Postgraduate School in August last year. Apparently, our inaugural lecturer of today was part of the audience. I was pleasantly surprised when I woke up the following morning in my hotel room in Lagos. A hefty 1,500-word electronic mail from Professor Dasylva on what his thoughts were on how to reposition this institution. His email was almost as long as my lecture, which he was trying to critique. So much for his diligence. Outside this university, Professor Dasylva has been, between October 2012 and February 2015, a visiting professor at Redeemers University, Mowe, in Ogun State, and later when they moved to their permanent site in the state of Osun. And it's fitting that the Vice Chancellor of Redeemers University is in this audience. And Professor Dasylva became the pioneer director of General Studies Program of that institution, and later the Dean of the College of Humanities, where he worked very hard and succeeded in establishing 3 additional academic departments. And he was again the pioneer recipient of the 2016 Award of Excellence in recognition of his contribution academically and administratively to Redeemers University. He has been coordinator of the Ibadan Cultural Studies Group with membership across the globe, pioneer board chairman and convener of the Toyin Falola Annual International Conference on Africa and the African Diaspora, fellow of the famous Salzburg Seminar, Session 374 in Austria since the year 2000, recipient of the 2009 Distinguished Africanist Award for Research Excellence of the University of Texas at Austin, USA, March 2009, fellow of the Institute of Ethnic Literature, CAS, Beijing, China, elected member of the advisory board of the International Association of Epic Studies, China 2012, and the only African on the board. He has been visiting Associate Professor of African Literature at Babcock University, Ilishan Remo, Ogun State, 2001 to 2002. Obafemi Awolowo University is alma mater, 2003 to 2004, as well as Redeemers University at 2012 till 2015. He has been external examiner and or moderator to Obafemi Awolowo University Ilefe, Lagos State University Ojo, University of Lagos Akoka, Ekiti State University Ado-Ekiti, Niger Delta University Wilberforce Island, Babcock University Ilishan Remo, Olabisi Onabanjo, Akoiwoye, and outside Nigeria at the University of Texas at Austin, University of Science and Technology Legon, Ghana, and Postgraduate University of Sierra Leone, Njala. In recognition of his contribution to oral poetics, he was one of the guests of the government of the Inter-China, Mongolia in November 2013. He was among the 6-member research team led by Professor Abiola Irele, invited to Toronto, Canada, for the project on the holistical retrieval as well as digitalization of the Ifa corpus and verses in August 2013. Professor Dasylva is an assistant pastor of All Saints Evangelical Church, Kilometer 147, Lagos Ojo Expressway. He is happily married to Dr. Mrs. Adebola Joko Dasylva, a retired high school principal, and the marriage is blessed with children. I now call on Professor Dasylva, who was recently elected unopposed as the Dean Faculty of Arts with effect from 1st August. With effect from 1st August 2017, to deliver his inaugural lecture titled Culture Matters, African Literary Tradition, Organic Ontologies, and Epistemological Roots. Professor Dasylva.
The Vice Chancellor, the Deputy Vice Chancellor Administration, Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic and Deputy Vice Chancellor Research, Innovation and Strategic Partnership, Registrar, Librarian, Dean of Arts, Provost of the College of Medicine, Dean of the Postgraduate School, Deans of other faculties and of students, Directors of institutes and centers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Between November 17, 1948, which was the foundation day, and today, June 29, 2017, there were 9 inaugural lectures delivered by 9 professors of note from the Department of English. One of the landmark events to mark the 1948 foundation day was the first inaugural lecture simply titled Bilingualism. It was delivered by Professor Paul Christopher of the Department of English. Today, it is a destiny fulfilled and a rare privilege to join my highly esteemed academic fathers, teachers, mentors, and more recently, colleagues who had performed similar ritual before me to deliver the 10th inaugural lecture with the title Culture Matters, African Literary Traditions, Organic Ontologies and Epistemological Roots on behalf of the Department of English and the Faculty of Arts. To those of you who attach value to number, 10 is a significant number in the Bible. I take the signifier of 10 as a number to mean a fulfillment of my responsibility to this great university, a tithe of my earnings over the years, a testimony to my commitment to the discipline. May this lecture be followed by more than 10 generations of dedicated scholars and students. Let me begin by saying that the lecturer of today is a product of prophecy, a child of destiny, who is constantly guided through grace by divine covenant between him and his God, the Almighty. So it has been, so it is, and will always be, that very many factors, events, circumstances, and people have contributed in many ways and degree to making me what and who I am today by his grace. They have also engendered my outlook on life and defined and redefined my responses to every situation as best as I could. The malevolent ones have only succeeded in waking up the Joshua in me. What is important here is that they have made possible my standing before you all to deliver today's inaugural lecture. This lecture is indeed a destiny fulfilled. Permit me to give just 5 out of several events that have had a lasting impression on me as a child and an adolescent, all with bearing on my scholarship. I was a target of a witchcraft attack by Yaoneru, a self-confessed witch, who made 2 attempts on my life in my childhood but failed. Her second attempt on my life as a young Catholic minor seminarian was her undoing. She paid with her own life, lynched to death by the irate public at Okesha Market in Elisha. I understand African beliefs and belief systems as a way by which our people think. As an adolescent, I witnessed 2 fighting elderly men. One used a whip on the other, who used the potency of the spoken word. The former died under the spell of the latter's spoken word. Incantations are part of our collective cultural heritage. At one of the masquerade festivals in Elisha, Odo Obalogun, at Ita Obalogun, I was among the crowd, a primary school pupil, when 2 of the masquerades, Egun Gbajero and Egun Pajekolobi, engaged in a war of words, and both died in a rather strange manner right at the scene. This is worldview in action. As a Form 3 student in the minor seminary, I mobilized all my mates, 21 of us, and we took on our final year senior boys, 7 of them, during one of the manual labor periods. The mathematics was very simple, ratio 1:3. We beat the hell out of them and freed ourselves from their oppression to which we were daily subjected. Again, in my 5th form in the seminary, I also mobilized my mates and chased out the white priests, including the rector, for being racists and for general maltreatment of students, whereas one of them in particular was truly fatherly, the others were not. It was as if the white reverend fathers were planted in the seminary to discourage our becoming African priests who were to replace them. The bishop caved in to our demand, and they were replaced with young African priests. Finally, as a young and promising banker, I lost my first love and fiancé to a medical doctor, in quote. It was painful, but I took it up as a challenge and resolved to quit the banking job, go to the university to study until I had a doctoral degree. Today, by the grace of God, I not only earned a doctorate degree, but I'm also privileged to stand before you to give this lecture as a full professor of this great University of Ibadan. Needless to add that the so-called medical doctor was a quack. He was actually a male nurse. I got to know that after I was already in the university as an undergraduate. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, distinguished audience, when I left the banking job in 1978 to pursue a university education, my determination from the outset, before I became an undergraduate, was to earn a doctorate. Yet, I had no clue as to the discipline of interest. All that mattered to me was to heal my injured spirit and pride, having been dumped by my then fiancé, who preferred a medical doctor, in quote, to me and my promising banking career. It was the late Professor Oyin Ogumba and Dr. G.G. Dara, now Professor of Oral Literature, whose stimulating lectures in my 300-level undergraduate class at the University of Ife got me introduced to oral literature as a serious academic discipline. Professor Ogumba rightly observed my keen interest in the course. 3 years later, he made me one of his field assistants as soon as I returned for the master's program in literature. The 5 scenarios I highlighted above were part of what foregrounded my rather vibrant childhood exposure and experience. They fueled my initial curiosity, which informed my justified suspicion and discernment early enough of the epistemic violence constantly inflicted on African creative and critical sensibilities by the West. They helped to trigger my endearment to oral poetics and performance. They also assisted me to mentally process both my childhood and adolescent experiences, to put them in historical and contemporary contexts. The power of the spoken word, as was demonstrated in those encounters I mentioned earlier. Similarly, Yoniru Saga had helped in solving my puzzle many years later on why the indigenous Yorubas celebrate villainy and such vices with equanimity and artistic vigor, with which they also celebrate virtues as marks of greatness and uniqueness in Yoruba Oriki. My childhood encounters had incubated in my memory and fueled my early curiosity for a deeper understanding of African worldview. The grounding in my background received an activist boost from a different historical trajectory. My experience in the Catholic Minor Seminary had prepared me for my later years in student union activism at the Polytechnic Ibadan and the University of Ife, and as co-founder and pioneer national secretary of Academic Staff Union of Colleges of Education, Ondo, as an active member of Campaign for Democracy, especially during the June 12th struggle, and CDHR, as well as in the ASU local and national struggles here at Ibadan, primarily for the welfare of members. Unfortunately, ASU is currently underperforming, but I believe it can do much better with our collective will and efforts. Distinguished audience, the informing principle of my activism is founded on Yoruba Omoluabi philosophical hermeneutics, not on Marxism. It has remained so to this day, to stand for the truth always, no matter what it takes, to keep those in authority on their toes, and those they superintend over as co-partners for quality service, to demand for equal opportunity for all and respect for human life and dignity, to resist injustice, inequity, and every form of corrupt practice. Therefore, I dare to conclude that the cumulative effect of my general exposure at critical moments of my childhood and adolescent years is situated in the rich Yoruba cultural cosmos and has very significantly constituted the foundational building blocks of my career in African literature, oral poetics, and performance. And ever since I settled for this career, I have come to appreciate African cultural values and literary traditions, both from their historical and contemporary contexts, and their capacity, among other things, to generate their own critical canons and standards. They foreground my resolve, as are evident in many of my publications, which significantly advance the boundaries of African literature and oral poetics beyond their received definition and field of study, rather than support or reinforce apparent uncritical imposition and application of non-African-based theories, terms, and concepts that at best make African literary productions and praxis mere appendages. This lecture is an epic journey into what I profess and that has been the focus of my teaching and research. It highlights in clear terms my contribution to scholarship in my field of specialization. This is encapsulated in one of my poems entitled Globalization. And I read, globalization, Don't frighten men with globalization, my friend. One long, very long, stinking history, our history. In phases came the predators, the Magi, their spine star, from behind the dunes and the bacans of distant deserts, across 7 seas, on civilizing mission, bearing myrrh of dry gins, frankincense of explosives, to globalize their god of gold, Laila. Their crisp pound, barrels of dullard brandy had knocked father down, traitor, betrayed kinsmen like sacks of stockfish, ferried to bloody plantation, their bastards' plantation. My sweat, my tears, their milk and tea. My starred soul, their tarred roads. The bitter pain of my lacerated back had fatalized their sugar canes. The looted mines of Auka and Kimberley had beatified their gilded cities, their globalized slave trade. Every ounce of ivory, my diamond, my gold, my oil, their abattoir. All ferried on my pool of blood of their global market, fueling their chariots of fire, riding rude on the tarmac of my tattered soul, their globalized economy. At the Berlin Global Conference, they scavenged my flesh, ravaged my land, buried my bones in a borrowed tomb of modernist cultures and bastard parents, globalized canon of theories, postmodernist values of pageant queens, their globalized culture. Under monstrous machines of predators, the Berlin Wall had crumbled, mangled their, their iron gates, USSR overrun, fragmented like a dismembered giant. From Abidjan to Abuja, Bosnia to Burundi, Kosovo to Congo to Cambodia, Ethiopia to Eritrea, Islamabad to Baghdad, Uganda to Ukraine, Iraq to Ireland, the Crescent Sharia, the Christian cross, in defense of some greed-stricken God, Kai, monsters, all, bloody gold, their globalized fratricide. The stone is rolled off the tomb of decay, World Bank, IMF AIDS. I, Africa, World Auto Center, I'm alive. The Easter money is here. The poem captures the spirit of this lecture and is loud on the direction of my research interest. Now, I shall endeavor to briefly explain the 4 basic components that make up the title of this lecture. By culture matters, I intend to engage first the tangible and intangible cultural practices that serve as markers of civilization and that draw critical attention to the centrality of Africa on matters of world cultures and knowledge production. Second, the whole idea of culture matters is meant to underscore the significance of culture as it defines and determines the worldview of a people, specifically Africans, their creative energy and literary expressions. Culture matters is about how this creative kinesis is in turn channeled into literary expressions to give voice to Africans' interpretation of reality. Therefore, the emphasis is on how literary expressions react, respond to, reflect, or refract that reality. Third, culture matters also reminds us that our development and future cannot be divorced from our established heritage. In the context of my research so far, culture matters draws attention to cultural thermodynamics that are responsible for the ever-changing literary traditions in Africa. The thrust of the argumentation is that a society's culture produces its own literary traditions, from which naturally or usually evolves organic literary theory or set of theories. Culture matters engages issues of cultural praxis as being factorial of people's worldview, identity, and basis for the formulation of literary poetics that is best applicable to it. Mr. Vice Chancellor, distinguished audience, the purpose of my research so far, and which this lecture articulates, is to make a case for homegrown, Africa-centered literary canons or body of theories that best suits its artistic and critical literary production. 2, African literary traditions. Again, the idea is to stretch our imagination beyond the familiar and explore both the oral and the written, artistic, and creative productions in Africa, with a view to locating the place of Africa in world cultures, critical thinking, and literary productions from as far back as the prehistoric times. 3. Organic ontologies. In the context of that, guided my research are concerned, among other things, with the old issue of reality and essence that stem from Africa's indigenous knowledge production and experience. In this case, organic ontologies offer a holistic perception and interpretation of reality strictly from the African worldview, that is, creative and critical sensibilities that emerge from them. Epistemological roots is foundational to my persistent quest and advocacy for a conscious rejection of non-African based literary theorization, because it is tantamount to intellectual infanticide. Therefore, epistemological roots in this context addresses the very foundational besetting problem of the contemporary creative and critical praxis in Africa. This is traceable to the fundamental inadequacies of and challenges that Western-based and non-African literary canons pose to African literary productions, where interpretive analytical application, among others, is concerned. Silhouetted against this background, therefore, is a compelling need to appreciate and engage more than is currently being done Africa's philosophical hermeneutic informed epistemology, not as an alternative or at the periphery, but as primary theories that evolve or are sourced from Africa's creative and critical traditions or productions. And if they must patronize non-African canons and concepts, it will have to be on strict African cultural terms. This is what the African feminists have done to Western feminism. The centrality of Africa to knowledge production, the African origin of orality and literacy. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, distinguished audience, it is neither my intention to be dragged into the age-long controversy on the appropriateness of, for example, the term orature, nor am I inclined, especially today being my day, to argue, as it were, the apparent contradictions in the term oral literature. To begin with, orature and oral literature are synonyms. As I have explained elsewhere, it is strictly the literariness of a collective experience and celebration of culture-related communal experiences which gives voice to lyric values and is rooted in the philosophy of a predominantly indigenous society. It is an exploration of shared human experience of tangible and intangible materials embodied in orally expressed diverse contextual hues and shades of creative skills and modes. Oral literature is actualized in rich aesthetic performance and colorful poetic language on the canvas of collective ownership. I have argued in one or two other publications that while figurative or poetic language involves the exploitation of the resources of language for the purpose of engendering meaning through effective communication, African oral poetics, like oral history, draws its relevance and viability from two components. One, symbology or semiotization of ethnographic finds as the basis of its materiality or substance. Two, oral performance or verbal rendition or narratology. They are means of verifying documentation in linguistic, literary, and material forms. Therefore, whether in the form of drawn pictures and images on rocks, or on the walls of caves, or in the tombs of legendary monarchs, including pharaohs and their pyramids, as in the ancient Egypt, and Nubia in Sudan, or Meroe, or writing on papyrus scrolls, or images of, or figurines, or crafted images on door panels, house posts, and other forms of paralinguistic communication, including, for example, the Yoruba Aroko semiotics. These are documentations with definite, discernible, intelligible, and interpretable texts of narratives. They perform the exact role as much as those that we are made to believe are letters of the alphabet today. Not even Walter Ong quite got it right in the introduction to his brilliant book when he wrote, and I quote, "The earliest script dates from only 6,000 years ago, and that literacy began with writing," end of quote, while at the same time he assumed that literacy originated from Europe. However, he was partially correct when he observed that there is a gross error of omission in the current scholarship that limits itself only to Western alphabetic writing when he compared world oral cultures with writing. The critic believed that the term literacy should rather be all-inclusive to include, and I quote, "other writing systems." Unfortunately, not even the ancient Egypt is anywhere to be found in Ong's list for consideration. This is either an omission in error or a product of Western epistemic intolerance. On the contrary, literacy involves learning, discerning, and reading correctly a communication in the form of letters, codes, symbols, as well as signs, including iconized images and figures as recorded documents and as a regulated or standardized transmitted information. Therefore, literacy can neither be limited to an alphabetic system that denies other forms of writing, nor should it be limited to the ability to discern or read letters and words composed only of such alphabets and their signs and symbols. Similarly, beyond the parochial Western semantics, terms like literature and literacy cannot also be ceded in favor of only written or printed creative works. If the Chinese cuneiform texts, which are characterized by drawn pictures and images, qualify as a form of writing and literacy, then African self-expression, as demonstrated through iconized images and drawn pictures, cannot be any less literate. African literacy and critical thinking traditions predate the years of Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, among other Western privileged ancient philosophers. Evidence abounds in African classical literatures and in well-documented archaeological finds that Sudan, Egypt, Nubia, Kerma, Meroe, and Kush constitute the African ancient civilizations, and ancient Egypt as the headquarters of world civilization. In specifically literacy and scholarship that predate the ancient Greece. As part of the rich African heritage of orality and literacy, Molefi Asante noted in his foreword to George James's Stolen Legacy that Senusret I of Egypt, and I quote, during the 12th dynasty, that is about 1900 BC, conquered the whole sea coast of India beyond the Ganges to the Eastern Ocean. He is also said to have included the Cyclades and a great part of Europe in his conquests. Secondly, the Armenian letters found in the government offices of the Egyptian king Ignaton testify to the fact that Egyptian empire had extended to Western Asia, Syria, and Palestine, and that for centuries, Egyptian power had been supreme in the ancient world. This was in the 18th dynasty, about 1500 BC, end of quote. The ancient mystery system domiciled in Egypt maintained a very rich library in Alexander by by which Africa remained the author center of world cultures, critical thinking, and of knowledge production. Therefore, the basis for tracing the origin of literacy to the West, as Ong and others have done, could only have been out of sheer ignorance. Nothing could have been further from the truth. It is one of the many atrocities of Western imperialism. Unfortunately, this has been part of the epistemic violence being perpetrated by Western scholar critics and the African adherents, which by so doing stand the truth on its head, especially on issues that concern African creative and critical productions. They achieve this through their brazen imposition of rather subtle patronizing prejudices and stereotypes on less discerning and unsuspecting African adherents. Orality, I must emphasize, does not translate to the absence of literacy. Neither is literacy the obliteration of memories. Similarly, literary criticism did not come to us in Africa through any of the ancient Greek philosophers. Criticism has always been integral of African indigenous oral performance and critical engagements. Universalism and globalism. These are two concepts, each of either sides of the same old coin, deliberately trumped up by the West, and that have helped to prop its hegemonic hold so far on the current direction of world cultures and literature. I like to situate the context of these two concepts for the purpose of determining their relevance in literary scholarship and discourse, especially as products of Western epistemic violence against the African creative and critical literary productions in particular. Universalism and globalism, by direct or subtle imposition, either deny or inferiorize other critical standards, especially from Africa, and their autonomy, and insist on only Western conceptual perspective for critical analysis of all literary production, regardless of regional peculiarities. The implication of a Western-induced perspective is that it compares the consciousness of otherness which leaves a non-Western scholar critic to either in desperation begin to scramble for the leftover space for relevance, or gasp desperately for breath as he bids for the recognition and survival, if at all, are nonetheless pushed to the periphery. Tony Falola, for example, argues that a perspective by implication does not stand on just two legs. Instead, one of its legs, of its key legs, is an extension of European methodology and definition, while the other leg can merely be a counter-discourse balanced by the first. End of quote. Some African critics have championed the advocacy that calls for an outright rejection of universalism, but which accepts with extreme caution some positive elements of globalism without universalism. One of the reasons for the advocates' rejection of universalism is because Eurocentrism has equated Europarticularism with universalism. That, among other things, has established an enduring impact on African scholarship. In the light of this, both Europarticularism and universalism must be disentangled with and reconfigured if most Western critical canons and literary practice must be relevant in the proposed dispensation. The suggested reconfiguration involves evolving a new concept that is typically African in its imprimatur, something that rejects being inferiorized but considers itself on equal terms. It is called pluriversalism. The direction of my research and many of my published works so far finds its voice and identity in these ideas of an emerging school which embodies the ethos described above. Pluriversalism. The term pluriverse was first used by Janet Conway and Jackie Singh in their joint publication, Radical Democracy in Global Perspective. Note from the pluriverse. Pluriversalism, as opposed to universalism, was conceptualized and recently consolidated, expounded, advanced, and popularized by Tony Falola. In quote, pluriversalism, as opposed to globalism and universalism, encourages multiple ontologies, multiple worlds to be known, not simply multiple perspectives on just one world. End of quote. Pluriversalism is a distinct agenda for advancing clearly defined methods and episteme for Africa's intellectual autonomy in world cultures and knowledge production, besides addressing some aspects of restoring and reclaiming Africa's lost centrality through a properly channeled energy, Pluriversalism imbues Africa with the capacity to originate, adopt, and adapt, invent, and renew such knowledge, such that rather than work with a handed-down perspective, it emphasizes the epistemic difference for creating an alternative knowledge system for interrogating the intertwined concepts of coloniality and modernity, to which Africa's fate seems to date to have been cruelly and intricately consummated. Finally, pluriversalism as an African epistemology encourages multiple ontologies. It is accommodating and ready to negotiate on its own terms. It does not regard itself as the other, as in the otherness created by Western universalism. Permit me, therefore, to expressly discuss the nexus linking pluriversalism with my research and some of my published works. Autoethnography. My area of specialization is African literature, oral poetics, and performance in English language expression. It covers the three major generic forms: drama, poetry, and narrative fiction and non-fiction. My research focus has largely been in literary criticism and theorization that is steeped in African ontologies. Findings have confirmed my earlier suspicion of the inadequacy of especially Western theories and their uncritical application to African literature. I have always believed that Yoruba ontology, for example, and lyric traditions have more than sufficient materials and tools to evolve its own appropriate literary epistemologies. I have worked consistently to evolve what I consider a more appropriate poetics and successfully deployed them in critical interpretive analysis of both indigenous and contemporary African literature, thereby giving new insight. This is in tandem with pluriversalism and its agenda as summarized in the previous segments of this lecture. In pursuance of these objectives, Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, distinguished audience, my research is directed at advancing indigenous African creative knowledge and criticism, as well as promoting quality intellection. To this end, my contribution to scholarship is in two distinct yet related areas: literary theory and criticism on the one hand, and book development on Africa, on African literature, oral poetics, and performance on the other hand. I shall briefly discuss a few of my works that represent broad and different topic groupings: literary theory and criticism, the African hero concept. My doctoral thesis, entitled Towards a New Taxonomy of the Hero in the African Novel, 1994, was motivated by the apparent inadequacies I observed in many works of critics and scholars of African literature, in particular, their uncritical deployment of Western theories in critical analysis of, especially, the hero and the classification of the hero types in the African novel. At best, the protagonist is either classified as hero and anti-hero or villain. Unfortunately, such classification fails to recognize African regional cultural peculiarities. Any such classification cannot rightly determine what the true African hero concept is or can possibly be. The study examines and locates the place of the hero in African oral literature using different data. It identifies 4 areas in oral tradition and performance that functionally define the African hero and categorize the hero types as carrier hero, epic hero, positive or negative hero, and the trickster hero. The findings showed the presence of the 4 major and 2 sub-hero types in the African novel that are traceable to the lyric sources. Therefore, key to my doctoral thesis and some of my publications in the devolution is the devolution of the indigenous concept of the African hero and its migratory pattern and phases of transformation in the contemporary African novel. Again, I soon realized in the course of my research that the oriki, or heroic or epic poetry performer, besides demonstrating to the audience his masterly and dexterous craftsmanship through the crafted lines in subtle ironies, is much more engaged with drawing attention to the uncommonness of logic, What is celebrated, as I argued in one of my journal articles on Oriki Aleule, is really not the villainy or intrigues or murder, but the uncommonness or uniqueness that makes these people and their actions likable. What interests critics or scholars in the rather engaging performance is the entire stylistics of representations and presentation. Likability in this context should not be misconstrued to mean an endorsement by the people. No. Rather, those traits remain vices and unacceptable in a truly indigenous African society. Therefore, the society, including scholars of oral poetics, find exciting and pleasurable the beauty in the poetic rendering. The pleasure derived from the totality of the context, content, and technique of performance in each case is similar to the pleasure that Aristotle draws attention to, which the audience derives from a tragic play. In other words, vices celebrated in Oriki like a tragic drama is unpleasant, but the art that produces them gives pleasure. Yoruba Oro, meaning and concept formulation. I was attracted in more than one way to the significance of Oro as a phonemic vehicle in a verbal communication and as determinant of being and non-being since my childhood. My publication, Oro in Yoruba World of Concepts and Meaning, interrogates the workings of the indigenous Yoruba mind in Oro configuration and its centrality to concept formulation. Oro simply means word, and it also means spirit. Although the position of many linguists today is that Oro as word and Oro as spirit are homonyms because they are both spelled the same way, albeit offer different meanings. On the contrary, Oro as word or spirit means one and the same thing, going by my own understanding of Yoruba ontology. Oro means a word at the denotative level and spirit at the pristine mythic level. There is Oro, as in Orogi, the spirit of the tree, or Orole, the spirit of the Mother Earth. Hunters, warriors, diviners, herbalists, and other initiates usually exploit the pristine mythic resources of the world through incantatory poetry. Perhaps it is appropriate to suspect a multiple pluralism which informs a cultural correspondence between Yoruba Oro, word spirit, and the Greek logos anemons, word spirit, and the Judeo-Christian doctrinal meaning of the word. The Bible refers to the word as life and spirit, and that the word was God. The Jewish God is Yahweh and is spirit. Ditto Yoruba Olodumare God, also spirit. Another key contribution through my research is my interrogating the indigenous Yoruba concept of Kadara, Anyama, destiny, fate, for the purpose of correctly locating the African tragic spirit. Kadara is a loaned word from Arabic Kader, meaning destiny. Kadara and Anyama are two sides of the same coin. The former is imposed, while the latter is self-chosen in the pre-life existence. The findings reveal the authentic African tragic spirit, as opposed to adaptations from Aristotelian, Aeschylean, classical Greek tragedy, or Elizabethan tragedy, or Senecan, Roman tragedy, by deconstructing Olarotimi's inappropriate transposition of the classical Greek tragedy, Sophocles, Oedipus Rex, and the African tragic hero in The Gods Are Not to Blame. Two critical ontological issues arise from the transposition by Olarotimi from the adapted Greek play. First is the apparent conceptual disconnect suffered by this playwright. For example, Anyama is one's personal choice in the pre-life existence. It is unalterable because you choose it by yourself. Anyama Ogbogun, destiny has no remedy. But what Odewale battles with in the play is Kadara, since his fate is an imposed one by the gods according to the Ifa oracle. Kadara could either be fatalistic or fortuitous, and it is alterable. Karaye makpa kadara amida. May the world not alter my fortune or good destiny. It is therefore on Yoruba for an Ifa priest to, like it does in that play, to turn back a supplant without an option or respite. In Yoruba Ifa divination, there is no problem under the sun, including Kadara, that does not have a solution. The only snag is the gravity or density of the sacrifices for propitiation. On the second critical issue, the configuration of the Yoruba pantheon is quite different from its classical Greek counterpart. Yoruba gods may have interacted in the primordial times as friends, wives, husbands, according to existing myths. They do not live together, nor do they plan mischief. Perhaps, with the exception of Eshu, the trickster god, but it's not the same Eshu as in the Bible. The Eshu, the trickster god, that is capable of mischief making. Each of the Yoruba gods and goddesses so pretends over different ministries and jealously guide their respective offices. There is no common ground among Yoruba gods and goddesses as exists among classical Greek gods. So, what the playwright has done is simply an uncritical transplantation which must be avoided in African literary and critical praxis. Another major contribution is my publication entitled Classificatory Paradigms in African Oral Narrative, in which I observed the failure of many scholars of oral literature, with the exception of Babatunde Ogunpolu, to correctly classify the African oral narrative. Their failure arose because they did not take into cognizance the apparent ambivalence of oral narratives and the multiplexity of form, mobility, seamlessness, and the mercuric fluidity of the subgeneric forms. I succeeded in evolving an alternative taxonomy to arrive at a set of paradigms and new classification of the indigenous African oral narratives, as opposed to earlier efforts by critics. Similarly, my contribution to the contemporary African theater criticism is worth noting. Femi Oshofison, and is seated in our midst here. Femi Oshofison has become a phenomenon. Unfortunately, critics of contemporary African theater have not been able to correctly place or locate his dramaturgy. My investigation and interrogation of earlier positions on Femi Oshofison's form of theater, which I silhouetted against the indigenous African folk narrative, led to fresh revelations. There is an apparent striking cultural convergence between Oshofison and Bertolt Brecht milieu and ideological inclinations. For example, the two societies are steeped in communitarianism and folk traditions. Oshofison's drama is not Brechtian. His dramaturgy is characterized by African folk narratology and performance. The difference my findings reveal is traceable to cultural peculiarities. Therefore, the uniqueness of Femi Oshofison's emergent theater has led to an entirely new theater concept that I call neo-rationalist theater. Another publication entitled Globalization of Yoruba Omoluabi Ideology deals with an all-encompassing philosophy that both defines and engages the sociology of Yoruba life and living and the prevalent ordered attitude and values of the indigenous society. Omoluabi globalization underscores the local relevance of Omoluabi and the possibility of its pluriversality. In Omoluabi emergent ideology, there is a plurality of poetics, not just one. Therefore, it remains a unique concept in the Yoruba Ifa knowledge system and practice that possesses the capacity for gauging socially approved human relations of global magnitude. And as a way of asserting the centrality of Africa in knowledge production and world culture, including ideology, the study recommends Omoluabi ideology for a moral healing of our ravaged world. Development of scholarly books on African literature. African literature scholarship is faced with two basic problems: scarcity of relevant reading materials and the fact that most available critical books and reading materials by critics who are steeped in Western theories and their African adherents are believed by many to be fraught with contestable and fallible assumptions. I do share this sentiment too. Contribution to scholarship is a two-way process: capacity to break new grounds in one's area of specialization and the ability to facilitate accessibility to such knowledge through published scholarly books and journal articles. The apparent growing concern for grants some of my critical exploratory and expository books and chapter contributions on African literature and oral poetics. They are my modest efforts at correcting apparent wrong assumptions that exist in many scholarly books on African literature. May I add that I have also made significant contributions in other areas of my research interest that include women's studies, film studies, and biographies. Finally, I am pleased to state that my research effort, Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, distinguished audience, so far at evolving novel critical standards that are strictly informed by African ontology and literary traditions, have yielded new insights and exciting results. In conclusion, since autonomy is the ultimate goal of universalism, it is high time the University of Ibadan, the nation's premier university, began to shake off the imperialist epistemologies of the West. The University of Ibadan must consider adopting the universalist ideology and assert its Africanity in scholarship and all its academic programs. Faculties and other academic units must embark on complete decolonization of their curricula by digging deeper into African classics in the different disciplines. Two immediate issues arise from this clarion call. First is the need for a radical revision of the curriculum in humanistic studies and the clinical science, especially in tropical medicine and pharmacognosy. Second, our great UI must ensure the sustenance of its greatness by being locally relevant, impacting positively its community, its neighborhood, the nation, and the globe. The humanities have long been involved in knowledge production and the promotion of quality intellection as far back as Africa's classical period. It is also a fact that there is no discipline that is meant to advance the cause of humankind which can afford to be independent of the humanities. Radical revision of most, if not all, the academic programs, especially in the humanities, has become imperative. Other departments and academic units in the faculties of arts, the social sciences, and medical sciences should do what departments of history, philosophy, and religious studies did in the 1970s by consciously indigenizing their curricula. No department in these faculties needs to seek legitimacy of the West to exist of its own accord as a serious academic discipline. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, distinguished audience, let me conclude this lecture by acknowledging first the Almighty God for the gift of life and for leading me thus far. He still leads me on because he is not through with me yet. I dedicate this lecture to three important people in my life. I begin first with my very dear wife, Dr. Adebola Bolajoko Dasylva. May I acknowledge publicly her sacrificial contributions to making me the best husband she shall always have, and the best father I never had to our 5 lovely boys, Oluwagbemiga, Oluwasegunfunmi, Oluwole, Oluwakayode, and Oreoluwa, now grown up men, 3 of whom have made both of us proud grandparents 4 times. Besides, Her understanding, love, and accommodating spirit have made both of us wonderful parents to hundreds of our extended children within and outside Nigeria. And those extended children are ably represented here by my wonderful, the last two borns, Toluwane and Temiloluwa. And I know you are somewhere there. They are the youngest of all my extended children. Second on my dedication list is Professor Oloruntoyin Falola, my brother, and a great benefactor and friend of the University of Ibadan. Many of our students in history, in philosophy, in CLA have benefited from his large heart, and they have enjoyed scholarship, in his university, and he personally supervised them. So let me say that he is, without any doubt, the most celebrated humanistic scholar and the most sought after globally. As at 2013, he has authored over 130 books. The third is Baba Amiel Modupe Fagbulu, my Jesha father. He is the model of the father I never had. Baba is one of the earliest and the oldest alumnus of UI. He graduated from the Department of Mathematics in 1952. He voluntarily retired from UNIBEN as Associate Professor of Mathematics to join UNESCO. He also consulted for USAID, UNICEF, World Bank, and Ford Foundation. Today, Baba is 92 years and few months old and is still waxing stronger. I promise I'm going to invite you all to his 100th birthday at Ilesha with Pandit Nyan. I want Baba to stand just for recognition, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful to my parents of blessed memory, Aba Akinshola Logunja and Eyemi Luka, Ojadeleye Elizabeth Silva. I sincerely appreciate all my in-laws, especially Mama Christiana Alice Aladekoma, Professor Johnson B. Aladekoma and his wife. Professor Aladekoma is a pioneer Nigerian nuclear physicist and pioneer vice chancellor of Leeds City University, Ibadan. His wife was also the first female bursar in a Nigerian university, the University of Ife, in the 1980s. My appreciation is extended to my dear sister Stella Doni Aladekoma and all the Aladekomans, the Omotoyis, the Oferes, the Omibiyis, the Fayemins, and the Latin Wars, the Dasylvas and the Adulojus, the Olowo Keres and the Fakambis. Thank you very much for your love and support always. I owe this university administration, past and current, a load of gratitude for contributing a great deal to preparing me for this day, first as a doctoral student and now as staff. Thank you very much for the award of excellence you gave me in 2012 for my contribution to our great UI, the first ever to a UI staff by the University Authority. I also extend the appreciation to my head of department, Professor Emmanuel Babatunde Omobowale, staff and students of the Department of English, the Dean of Arts, Professor Adebola Ekola, and heads of department, all colleagues and non-teaching staff, students and friends in the faculty and other faculties, institutes, centers, and the College of Medicine, and all committee members with whom I have been privileged to serve in the university. I'm also very grateful to Professor Zed Debo Adeyewa, Vice Chancellor, Redeemers University Ede, and his management team, staff and students for honoring me with the award of excellence for my contribution to the university while I was a visiting professor to the great institution. Again, the award was the very first in the history of that university. I'd like to express My profound appreciation to the following academic progenitors and mentors within and outside the Faculty of Arts: Professor Emeriti Ayobanjo, Ayobangboshe, Femi Oshofisan, Biola Odejide, and Ben Elugbe. The late Professor Sam Omar Asayin, my supervisor and mentor of blessed memory. Professors Danny Zebaye, Niyi Oshundare, Ayodele Falashe, former Vice Chancellor, Augusta Omamo, Abogunrin, Olufemi Bamiro, another former Vice Chancellor, Adekunle Adeniran, Festus Adesoye, and some, not all, of my friends, distinguished senior colleagues and colleagues outside the Faculty of Arts, in the university, in UK, in the USA, Canada, and China, including inner China, that's Mongolia. Yeye Dr. Bisi Falola, Dr. Iyabo Fagbulu, Dr. Aderonke Adesanya, Professors Victor O. Adetimirin, GOS Ekagwere, CO Kolawole, L. Olutayo, Professor Adigun Agbaje, Abiodun Sani, Edith Ajayoba, both Bola Udegbe, Dr. Donyo Debawale, among others. I'd like to especially acknowledge all those whose doctoral thesis I supervised in this university. They include Professor Sarah Ayan, Professor Bola Sotunsa, Professor Shayo James, Professor Tony Jegede, Dr. Sunday Awafeda, Dr. Victor Obeide, Dr. Yetunde Akorede, Dr. Adejobi Adejuma, Dr. O. Omosule, Dr. Shola Olorunyomi, Dr. Felix Benoba, Dr. Rotimi Fasan, Dr. Doyin Agoru, Dr. Anya Egu, Dr. Silva Sholanke, Dr. Temitope Agbola, and Dr. Idowu Adekunle. I'm proud of you all. Finally, I thank my Christian Family Church, All Saints Evangelical Church, Ibadan, my father in the Lord and senior pastor Ebenezer Olumiyiwa Omobowale and wife, Mama Modupe Omobowale, all the assistant pastors, Professor Adedotun Ogundeji, Professor C.O. Kolawole, Professor E.B. Omobowale, Pastors Oluwadamilare and Aboluwade, the elders and the whole church members that I know many of them are represented here. I thank you all for your encouragement, support, love, and prayers. You shall surely not miss your reward in Jesus' mighty name. I want you to join me in this short chorus in appreciation of God. Come and join me, sing hallelujah. Jehovah Jireh has done me well. Come and join me. Come and join me, sing hallelujah. Jehovah Jireh has done me well. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, I appreciate and thank you for this wonderful privilege. Distinguished audience, I thank you all for your patience and for listening. God bless you.